Hey everyone, I hope everyone had a great holiday and are looking forward to what the new year has in store. My name is Joey Batkoski and my clean date is October 3rd, 2019. I'm starting this channel to create a community around substance abuse recovery, personal growth, and living a thriving sober life. Whether you're just starting out, struggling with relapse, or celebrating milestones, this channel is your resource for real talk, inspiration, and support. To be honest, I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to becoming a creator, but one of the mantras for my recovery has been to get outside my comfort zone and take that first step of faith. Because after all, if you stop growing, you start dying. And if you are here, that shows me you want to stick around for a little while longer, which is a great sign. So I thought it would be good to kind of introduce myself and kind of give a little bit of a background, including my upbringing, kind of when my addiction started and how did it start, maybe go over some key challenges that I was experiencing at that time, and just kind of the complete and utter chaotic toll it had, the impact on my life, my relationships, and my health. So I'll start off with that background. So, I mean, it didn't really have, a crazy, you know, different upbringing, I would say. I was born at a small kind of farming community outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. Um, Mom and dad are still married to this day. I have a younger brother by 2 years. Grew up, played every sport imaginable, star soccer, basketball, football, baseball, and anything, you know, dealing with playing outside and kind of being surrounded by team members and stuff like that. My father was very involved, kind of coached my rec league teams, uh, you know, spent hours and hours outside playing with me, not because he wanted to, but, I asked him to go outside and play. So, had a great, childhood, kind of brought up middle class family, didn't have too much, didn't have too little, very comfortable in the way that we grew up. And then let's see here. For some reason, I always from a very early age was an extreme overthinker. And I think, I was just always very curious about things that I would say kids my age really didn't spend a whole lot of time worrying about. I mean, like very deep philosophical questions like what is the purpose of life? Where do we go when we die? Just very deep questions like that. And I grew up in church and I asked these questions to certain people in the church, and I just never was satisfied with the answers that I received. So very early on, I developed this fear of dying, I would say, and just it consumed me. And I really didn't know what the feeling of anxiety was, but come to look back, that's exactly what it was, right? So I remember my aunt actually taking me and my brother to the opening night of Harry Potter in the movie theaters. And we got our popcorn, we got our drinks, we got our candy, and we were all sitting in that movie theater, which was obviously packed. And I started to breathe heavy. My chest, it felt like an elephant was sitting on my chest. I couldn't breathe, and I was just going deeper and deeper into panic. And so I grabbed my aunt's arm and told her I have to get out of here. And I was about 11 years old. I remember I was in sixth grade at the time. So very early on. And I ended up missing, about a week and a half of school because I could not, I literally was, I remember telling my mom that I was afraid that I was going to forget how to breathe. So that's how much panic I was in. I literally thought that I was going to forget how to breathe, involuntary, you know, activity that I was just going to somehow forget how to breathe and I was going to die. So eventually I remember going to therapy for a little bit, didn't really and like it, didn't really see the point at a young age. So went to therapy for a little bit, ended up kind of just white knuckling it through and kind of, got through middle school, got into high school. And this is kind of where everyone else started kind of dabbling drugs and alcohol, weed, stuff like that. So, and I had no desire whatsoever in high school to do anything of the sort. Just stayed away from it. I played sports, got good grades, had goals. I wanted to go to college. I wanted to get a house. I wanted to get married. I had this kind of picture of what life was, and I was going to, accomplish those goals. So high school comes around, freshman, sophomore, junior year get done, and I remember going on a beach trip between my junior and senior year in high school, and we went with about four of my buddies. And the specific friend that I went with, his parents didn't necessarily have the strictest rules in place. So they were buying, alcohol for, us 16, 17-year-old kids. And as long as we were, drinking in front of them, then everything was fine. So that was my first experience drinking alcohol. And man, I remember just as vivid as it was yesterday, it felt like this weight had completely lifted off of my shoulders when I drank for the first time. It was insane. Like all of that anxiety and pressure that I was feeling just all of a sudden was lifted. I was able to be more of myself. And I just remember sitting on the beach past midnight, drinking, and thinking to myself, man, I found the cheat code to life. I immediately knew that I wanted to continue to drink and I wanted to continue to do it as often as I could. So I think that's, now looking back, that's exactly where it started for me. And yeah, so after, got through high school, finished that up, still drinking a little bit, went to community college, went to college, and through this entire time, I was still dating my high school sweetheart, and we moved in together. She was going to school, I was going to school, I was working a job, she was working a job. So we had a lot going on. And of course, we were young. We about whenever Thursday hit all the way to Sunday, we were going out every single night. We were drinking, we were partying, and just living, burning the candle at both ends, I would say. And everything was fine, and then eventually I asked her to be my wife. We got married, and soon after we got married, things started to take a turn for the worst. I, was drinking a lot, coming home from work, and, you know, instead of drinking a little bit, I would continue to drink, and she started bringing up, you know, or questioning how much I was drinking. And so I would always make excuses. There was always a reason to drink. And at this time, I had yet to even dabble in any, hard drugs at this point. So eventually, I didn't want to disappoint her and show her that couldn't really control my drinking. And I was still hanging out with a whole bunch of friends from my hometown, only moved 10 minutes away. And so I knew that they were doing, harder drugs. And at this point, I was, older, graduated college. I had my first house. I was married. And I was like, hey, I could accomplish all these goals as long as I'm getting all of my responsibilities taken care of. I didn't see the problem of partaking a little bit in some extracurricular activities, I guess. And to be honest, I was very naive when it came to addiction. I really didn't understand addiction. I thought it was, lack of willpower. I thought that people were just weak who said they were addicted. I just had no idea what addiction was. So I think, that being naive and thinking that somehow I was going to be smarter than addiction, or that I wasn't going to be one of those, use cases or samples of, someone who got addicted and completely ruined their own lives and the lives of those around them. So, I started dabbling in, harder drugs and eventually, my wife got pregnant with our first daughter. And yeah, it was tearing us apart at the fabric. I could not think, just that compulsion and that obsession to use eventually caught up with me. I remember, going and purchasing something with a friend, and my friend had been using a lot longer than I had. And I remember putting mine in my pocket, and he immediately wanted to use. And he said, "Oh, you're not going to do yours?" And I said, "No, I don't want to use right now. My wife's going to catch on, and I don't want to kind of rock the boat or anything like that." And he said, "Oh, you're not addicted yet." And that just has stuck with me ever since. So ended up, confessing to my wife and realizing, hey, like I have a young daughter coming into this world. I need to change something. I need to do something different. I wasn't happy. I was unmotivated. I was bouncing back and forth between jobs because I couldn't hold down a job. My wife was getting more and more sick of the things that I was doing. I was lying. I was hiding things. I wasn't being truthful with her. My family, especially my brother, um, couldn't ask for a better brother. And I could tell that he was just a disappointment in his eyes when we would get together. It was just heartbreaking. So eventually, there always comes a turning point. A lot of times people say, yeah, this is when I hit rock bottom. I would say I hit a bunch of different rock bottoms. I know one time I heard someone say that, their rock bottom was just was a trap door. They kept digging and digging, and then, when they thought they hit rock bottom, they would just fall a little bit further. And I would say I relate to that pretty much 100%. I thought, me going into a detox center was my rock bottom. I thought, oh man, I'm never going to get out of this. And then, of course, different consequences kept happening, and my rock bottom kept getting kind of deeper and deeper. But I remember vividly, kind of like the turning point was my daughter was almost 2. She was born in July, and my birthday is in June. And my wife had planned this great evening for us. We were going to go to this local movie theater to watch a movie that we both had been wanting to watch, and you could get dinner at the movie. And it was just a good time. Like, she had spent a lot of time planning this. We got a babysitter. And while we were at the movie, literally the only thing that I could think about was, what lie can I say to get away from her to go cop and to get what I really wanted? And that just the thought of that and just the self-awareness of sitting in that movie theater and having those thoughts just broke me to my core. And so I remember walking out of that movie theater and sitting in our car because she knew something was off. Like, this wasn't her first rodeo. She had caught me in tens of thousands of lies over the last 2 or 3 years. And I just told her, I broke down, I was crying. I said, I need to go somewhere because nothing else had worked. I tried Suboxone, I tried white knuckling it, I tried, hey, I'm only going to drink beer. I tried every single thing under the sun to get clean and to overcome the recovery or the addiction. So that was when, on my birthday in 2018 is when I decided that, hey, I needed to go somewhere. And so that was really kind of like the turning point. And, what motivated me is that, like I mentioned earlier on, my dad was a great dad, and I wanted to be a great dad to my daughter, and I wanted to be a great husband to my wife, the husband that she deserves. And I didn't want to see my brother, who my whole life I was trying to be a good role model, and just to see, the disappointment in his eyes when he looked at me or when I asked him for $100 because I couldn't pay this and it was a lie and he knew it was a lie. And him just, being stuck in that situation of, either helping his brother out or enabling his brother. So I wanted to, change all of that. And so that was the first steps that I took, right? I went to a detox center, right in Raleigh, North Carolina, ended up detoxing for about 12 days and went door to door to a recovery center out in Asheville, North Carolina. Great place. Ended up staying there for, I think it was roughly around little shy of 60 days. So around 52 days I stayed there in Asheville, North Carolina. And I remember, getting out of there, my wife was so happy at this point. She still believed in me and I started to, believe in myself again. And she picked me up and she had rented a convertible, came 4 hours away, picked me up, and we listened to, I remember Post Malone's new album at the time, all the way back, just having a good old time. And I think, that kind of transitions into my kind of recovery journey, I would say, just kind of like my early days and my challenges. So I would say at the beginning of recovery and actually being in the recovery scene, I still had a reservation about wanting to drink. I was still relatively young. I just related any type of fun to drinking, right? Like if we're going to a movie, I wanted to drink. If we were going to a concert, I wanted to drink. If we were going to anything that we were doing, it had to be accompanied by drinking. So I was not really willing to give up the drinking side of things. So that was a huge challenge to start off on my kind of early days in recovery. And it ended up being, a lot of people they get clean and that's their clean date. That was not the case for me. It took me, I don't even know. I lost count. I got, in the rooms of NA, that white key tag, I probably have a shoebox full under my bed somewhere. But anyways, so that was a big challenge. I remember going out about 2 to 3 weeks after I got out of my first rehab and going to play golf with some buddies of mine. And, the things they tell you is people, places, and things, right? So early on in recovery, I don't think I should have been on the golf course because I always kind of related those two to drinking. Gone with friends that didn't really understand recovery. So, and that was my decision. So I went golfing. They were drinking. I was not drinking, and I would say that changed by about hole number 9. I decided to partake. I mean, at the end of the day, what could a couple of beers hurt? Well, in about 4 hours after that, I was back to my personal drug of choice and off to the races. So, ended up doing that. Went back to rehab at the end of that year. Well, let me back up a little bit. So, and this is the reason why I want to back up is because this is pretty important. So, I had a best friend of mine, going back to third grade, and we were using together, and we both, we would use and then we would kind of talk to one another and say, hey, we got to get clean. He was having a young son, and my daughter and his son were about, 8 months apart in age. And we just both wanted to get our lives together, but we could not stop using. So I remember one day he came to me and he asked me if I wanted to come to celebrate recovery with him. And I was like, what celebrate recovery? And he was like, oh, it's like a Christian 12-step program. And that completely turned me off because I just wasn't, I mean, I grew up in church, like I said, wasn't into the church thing. I'd always, I knew something was out there, so I guess I was agnostic. I didn't not believe that there was a God, but, just didn't know what was the right God. I don't even know if that's the right term, but we're going to go with it. And so reluctantly, I decided to say, hey, yeah, I'll check it out on Friday night. I remember it. So I showed up Friday night, of course. I wasn't going to show up not high. So I showed up high and they were worshiping. They went through, their form of the 12-step meeting. And I just remember sitting in there and I don't know exactly what it was, but I saw something out of my friend that I hadn't seen before, which was really weird for me. And I didn't really know how to explain it, but he just looked happier, looked like he was taking it serious. And I was kind of going into it as like a joke, didn't really want to take it serious. Thought this was just going to be like a one-time thing, but he seemed like he was really into it. So I decided to come back the next week on Friday. And walking into the hallway, I remember two gentlemen that I had barely even spoken to the week before pulled me aside into a room and told me that if I didn't change my life, that I was going to die and that I was going to leave behind my wife and my daughter, and they did not want to see that happen. So they offered to sponsor me to go to a different Christian-based recovery center. And at first, my knee-jerk reaction was, I don't want anything to do with another recovery center. I literally just got done with it. Holidays were coming up. This is right around Thanksgiving and Christmas time. So I kind of blew it off. But once again, something was talking to me, something was eating at me. And I knew at this point my wife was totally fed up. She was over it. So I called them. I remember saying, "Hey, I'm ready to go." And they picked me up the next day. One of the pastors and his wife picked me up at my house the next day and drove me and dropped me off to that recovery center. So that was a 30-day program. Got out of that 30-day program, left probably about 2 days early. My father came and picked me up, drove me back to the house. I knocked on my front door, waiting to see my wife and just be super excited that I was home. And that was not the case. She was literally, the disgust in her eyes towards me was just like palpable in the air. Like I could just feel it. So, and I knew at this point there was no amount of words that I could say to get her to trust me. It was going to have to be actions. Actions were going to have to be louder than my words this time. And that's what I set out to do. And, you know, about 2 months later, I remember on Super Bowl Sunday, wife took a pregnancy test, found out that she was pregnant with, ended up being my youngest daughter. So that threw a curveball. And of course, she was afraid. She was like, so worried, like what is going to happen. I don't even know if this guy I'm with is going to be able to stay clean and sober. I have no clue. And I was scared underneath, but I had to kind of put on this facade of, don't have to worry about anything, we're going to figure it out, and everything's going to be okay. And so I stayed clean, I would say, for about 7.5 months. And for whatever reason, I decided to drink again. And of course, that drinking led to other things. But this time it was the guilt and the shame set in super, super quick, like within an hour, 2 hours. And I just knew, like, hey, here's my wife. I missed my first daughter's second birthday in the first rehab. My wife's pregnant, 7.5, 8 months pregnant, about to have my second daughter. And I just didn't know what to do. I started panicking, and in that panic, it just set, that snowball, that hamster wheel of, I've got to feel better. And the only way I really kind of know how to feel better right now is to use. And when I use, I feel more shame and guilt. So I use more. So it was like this merry-go-round of using, feeling shame, guilt, using, etc. And I remember just, on the way, because this was it was going to be a planned C-section, I believe. But when we went, the baby had fixed herself in my wife's belly. So we were able to kind of just go at it at that for a natural birth. And I remember on the way to the hospital, I just once again, I was sitting there thinking like, man, I'm going to the hospital and I'm not really that excited because I was so afraid. I was terrified that I wasn't going to be the father that I wanted to be. I wasn't going to be the husband that I was going to be. I was letting everyone down time and time again. And my wife saw that, but had my second daughter, and a week after she was born, long story short, is my clean date. So October 3rd, 2019 is my clean date. And since then, that was kind of like my recovery journey, and I've celebrated tons of milestones, and not everything has been easy, to say the least. There's definitely been challenges. There still are challenges. I'm not perfect in the recovery steps. I don't do everything by the book, but I learn from other people. I'm open-minded, I'm honest, and I'm willing to try things. And sobriety has given me a life that I literally never dreamed of. I remember about 5 years ago, yeah, over 5 years ago, one of my first sponsor told me to write down 1-year goals and 5-year goals, and I remember I wrote them down, and the funny thing is I didn't even know what I did with that list, and about 2 years ago, I remember standing in my parents' kitchen, and on the side of their refrigerator was that list of what I had written for my 1-year goals and my 5-year goals, and funny enough, I didn't even remember what I had written, but I had literally accomplished every single one of my 1-year goals and almost half of my 5-year goals already at that time. And, you know, today I'm a great father, I'm a great husband, I'm a great brother, and now a great uncle, and a great son, and just I want to give back. I've learned so much, through these 5 years, and I'm still learning something every single day. I definitely don't compare myself to others. I compare myself to, what I was the day before, and my whole goal is to get 1% better each day. So that's, why I wanted to start this channel. I wanted to, even though I didn't have literally no clue what I'm doing, I'm learning on the fly, but if I can help out one single person, then it makes all of this worth it, more than worth it. Because not only can you help one person, but if one person can get just something, and that cannot change just their lives, but a generation to come from their own family. So I would love to go on this journey with everybody, watch me grow and watch everyone else grow. So if you would, like, comment, subscribe, and I definitely want to, hear from you guys. If you want to comment and kind of tell me a little bit about your story and maybe some things that you're struggling with, I would love to interact on here. But I look forward. I'm going to try. My goal for 2025 is to post a new video each week. So that's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to try to stick to that goal. And I appreciate you guys listening. And I look forward to the next episode. Thank you very much. Talk to you next time.